Get ready to dive into stories that will mess with your mind and make your heart race. Imagine being alone at home and suddenly feeling a presence you can't see, or seeing your reflection smile back at you while you're frozen with fear. In this video, I bring you real, disturbing stories that will make you think twice before turning off the lights. Stick with me until the end and discover the darkest, most inexplicable corners of the unknown. If you're brave enough to continue, subscribe now, and let's embark on these chilling tales together. Story 1. The House of Eternal Weeping. Since I moved into this old colonial house, I've been experiencing things that defy logic. The house is isolated, surrounded by ancient trees, and every window seems to hold secrets from decades past. On the very first night, I heard a soft, rhythmic sound, like water dripping from a leaky faucet. I got up, thinking it might just be the old plumbing, but when I followed the sound, I found a pool of water in the middle of the upstairs hallway. I looked up, expecting to see a leak, but the ceiling and walls were completely dry. The unease I felt was almost overwhelming, and the dripping sound only intensified over the next few days. Eventually, the sound wasn't just drops of water. It was a faint, sorrowful crying, as if the very walls were mourning. My young daughter, Sophia, began having terrible nightmares. One night, she woke up crying and said a sad lady had been standing at the foot of her bed, silently weeping. In the nights that followed, I could hear soft cries coming from the hallway. Finally, I mustered up the courage to follow the sound to where I had first found the mysterious pool. There, kneeling in the darkness, was the shadow of a woman with a face soaked in tears. After researching the history of the house, I learned that decades ago, a woman and her daughter had vanished without a trace here. All they found was a pool of water in one of the rooms. Now, every night, I listen to the sorrow that echoes through the house, a grief that refuses to rest. In the deepest silence, I know she's there, waiting, as if she wants to share her pain with me. Story 2. The Innkeeper of Shadows. I love exploring old villages and ancient places, and on one of these trips, I found an inn in a remote village. Upon my arrival, I was greeted by an elderly innkeeper who seemed to carry a certain darkness in his eyes. He welcomed me, and before I went up to my room, he whispered, "Stay away from room 204. Naturally, my curiosity was piqued. When everyone seemed to be asleep, I walked quietly down the dark corridor and stopped outside room 204. The door was slightly ajar, almost as if inviting me inside. My heart was racing as I slowly pushed the door open and looked inside. The room was blanketed in oppressive shadows, but in the far corner, I saw it, a formless shadow watching me. Its eyes, dark and smoldering like embers, were fixed on me. I was paralyzed until a cold chill swept over me, compelling me to run back to my own room. The next morning, I mentioned what I had seen, and the innkeeper simply gave me a cryptic smile and said, "The shadow knows your name now." Ever since that night, I felt its presence following me, and each place I stay, I sense its eyes watching, waiting for the right moment to appear once more. Story 3. The Call of the Forgotten Lake. Since I was young, I've always been drawn to lakes and isolated forests. It's a way to escape the rush of life and find peace where the world can't reach me. So when I heard about a hidden lake deep in a dense forest, I was enchanted. The place was remote, and only a few people in town even knew it existed. I arrived at the lake one summer afternoon. It was breathtaking, with the calm water mirroring the sky and a silence that seemed to consume everything around it. I sat on the shore, closed my eyes, and breathed in the stillness, until something made me snap my eyes open. A whisper. Someone, or something, was whispering my name, as though the voice was coming from the depths of the lake. I took a step back, feeling a chill race down my spine. The silence of the forest grew more intense, and when I looked at the water, I saw her. A woman with long, wet hair and hollow eyes, staring at me from the surface. Without realizing it, I stepped closer to the water, hypnotized by her gaze, until I felt something cold wrap around my ankle. I screamed and stumbled back, and when I looked again, her reflection had vanished, leaving only the dark, silent lake. Since that day I've been different. Every year, I find myself returning to the lake, unable to resist, as though something within me is drawn back there. On the quietest nights, when I close my eyes, I can still hear her calling to me, her voice closer each time, until I wonder if I'll have the strength to resist again. Story 4. The Rocking Chair Doll. I've never liked dolls, so when I inherited my grandmother's old house, I was disturbed to find a porcelain doll hidden away in the attic. She had an old lace dress, dark curly hair, and eyes that seemed to follow my every movement. I decided to leave her up there, locked away and forgotten. But then strange things began to happen. Late at night, I'd hear light footsteps coming from the attic and the sound of a rocking chair creaking. I tried to ignore it, but one night the rocking sound was louder. I went up there, determined to end whatever was haunting me, but when I opened the door, I saw the doll sitting in the rocking chair, her head tilted, staring straight at me. A shiver ran down my spine and I stood there frozen. I quickly turned off the attic light, locked the door and ran downstairs. The next night I heard it again, the rocking chair creaking, this time closer, almost right outside my room. Desperate to end it, I took the doll and threw her into a bonfire in the backyard, watching her burn. I felt relieved for a moment, but since then every night, I still hear the sound of a rocking chair echoing down the hallway. Whatever it is, it hasn't left and it's still watching me. Story 5. The cursed mirror. Mirrors have always intrigued me, but I'd never felt anything like the eerie pull I experienced when I bought that antique mirror. It had a Victorian frame with intricate, ominous carvings, and the glass seemed darker, almost as if it held shadows within. On the first night I placed it in my room, I had a strange dream. I was trapped inside the mirror, observing my room from a distorted angle. In the reflection, I saw a woman staring at me with a cold, empty smile. I woke up in terror and rushed to check the mirror, but it seemed normal. However, over the following days I began noticing odd things. Shadows would flicker in the background of the mirror, even when I was alone. One night, I woke up feeling watched and glanced at the mirror. My reflection was smiling back at me with a sinister expression, though my own face was frozen in fear. The feeling became unbearable and I decided to get rid of the mirror. Just before I broke it, I caught one last glimpse and what I saw froze my blood. My own hand, inside the reflection, was reaching out as if trying to pull me in. I shattered the mirror, but it didn't bring me peace. Now, in every mirror I look into, I catch a glimpse of a shadow beside me, waiting for our reunion. Story 6. The invisible tenant. After my grandmother passed, I inherited her old house and decided to stay there temporarily while making some renovations. She'd always told me to avoid the back room, a place no one was supposed to enter, but I'd never understood why. On the first night, as I walked through the hallway, I heard heavy footsteps coming from that empty room. Determined to face whatever was haunting me, I decided to spend the night in there, even though the atmosphere was stifling. Sometime in the early hours, I woke up to a weight pressing down beside me on the bed. When I turned, I saw the figure of a man, pale and expressionless, lying next to me with a twisted smile. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. It felt as if he were draining the very life out of me with his cold, empty gaze. When I finally managed to turn on the light, he vanished, but the terror of that night has never left me. Since then I've kept the back room locked, but every night, I hear the same footsteps, the same dragging sounds coming closer, as if he's waiting for the perfect moment to appear again. And those were some of the most terrifying stories you've ever heard. So, would you dare to face the unknown? Leave a comment with your own experiences and let me know which story was the most terrifying for you. If you enjoyed this content, subscribe to the channel for more stories that defy reality and test the limits of fear. Until the next video, if you have the courage to come back, stay alert because terror might be closer than you think.